so I got my corn and put my phone, the corn's in the phone, and I called my mother and says, I'm probably coming home today. I want to apologize for letting you down, and please tell my grandmother because I was too saddened or too afraid or scared to call her directly,
Yeah.
and my grandparents. Long story short, um, there was an investigation. Later that day, I get a phone call to come to the president's office. She took off the gown and she told all of my 11 cousins to get in this gown. And she says, from this standpoint forward, your my expectations for you as my grandkids is that each of you bring me your college graduation gown. Entering my master's program, I got very active within my profession
Mm-hmm.
and my professional organizations. And so I knew that within 2 years, I was going to enter into the field of higher education. What I didn't know is that during my third year within a profession, I was going to have the opportunity to become a college vice president. I was
Mm-hmm.
age 26. So I was publishing articles and writing book chapters within my professional organizations. That is good, but that is a very small slither of people that you're talking to. So I
Gotcha.
decided that it's time for me to start doing that for my community.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you about freedom. So one of the things I realized is that we have a leadership crisis. And the reason that I think we have a leadership crisis is in part because we're not training leaders any longer.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Cedric B. Howard, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about this amazing book that you wrote called Unshakable Leadership. But we also want to talk about the amazing things you're doing to help people improve their lives, man. It's awesome what you're doing, and I'm super proud of you. So I'm super excited to have you here.
Thank you, Mike. It's truly an honor and pleasure for me to be a part of your podcast. And to tell you a little bit about myself and about my journey is really exciting. And I have found that it is very rewarding for me to really live those experiences, but it's been enlightening for others to know. Because oftentimes as professionals, people see the polished jewel. They see the diamond that is shining. They don't realize the process you have to go through in order to make that polished.
Yeah, like the overnight
diamond.
success that took 30 years.
Absolutely. 31 long, hard years.
Yeah, exactly, right?
From that perspective. Yes, my journey began in Macon, Georgia.
Okay.
My mother was a very young mother, single mother. My father was in my life, but not directly. His parents were. So my grandparents on both sides played a major role. I oftentimes, when people know my journey, I realize, and I tell them, I was on government assistance. And my mother said, I only want to be on government assistance for 1 year. And so that was her end goal. So by the time I turned 1 year old, she got a job working for a paper mill. And, that began her journey and began my transformation of going from welfare to wealth.
Yeah.
From that perspective. And, to kind of understand my journey is I've been very, very engaged in understanding my transformation all throughout my life. Fortunately and unfortunately, go ahead, Mike.
So what was your favorite thing about growing up in Macon, Georgia?
My favorite thing about growing up in Macon, Georgia is the fact that I grew up in a community.
Yeah.
that was very similar to, my upbringing.
Yeah.
And in that community, everyone cared about each other. Everyone cared about, your well-being and your, taking care of each other. So that told me and taught me the importance of making sure you have a ecosystem and a network. Because in that ecosystem, that network allows you your foundation.
Yeah. It's the community, right? It's everybody watching out for everybody.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just awesome, man.
Everyone is raising everybody else's kids.
Yeah. What a great place to grow up. So, growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Um, uh, to me, I wanted to find influence in many ways.
Yeah.
So the most important influences on my life were my grandparents.
Yeah.
On both sides, because I had on one side, my primary caretaker was my maternal grandmother. She took care of the day-to-day operations, and all she taught me was hard work.
Yeah.
She says, she used to say, baby, because I grew up in Georgia.
Mhm.
It's not about being the smartest or the richest. It's about how hard would you like to work to attain your goals. And
Ooh.
so she taught me hard work.
Ooh, I love
And
grandma.
actually, I had my paternal grandparents who taught me about everything else. And
Yeah.
so my grandmother, which I spend weekends with my paternal grandparents, taught me about etiquette.
Yeah.
So I was reading an etiquette book, and my grandfather and I used to challenge each other on checker and chess. So he taught me about strategy and positioning myself,
Cool.
and the importance of understanding who I am as a person.
You kind of had the
Uh,
best of both worlds.
well, best of both worlds. And so that's why I think having a well-rounded experience positioned me to have other influences in my
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
throughout life. And, one of the most enriching things I had was 6'4", and I've been 6 foot since I was probably 12 or 13.
Mhm.
In our neighborhood was a ice plant. And in the ice plant, they needed workers. And so, and it was called Heat Ice Company.
Mhm.
And so people thought I was actually larger than, older than I actually was at the time. And, you had to be 15 and 16 to work. So I looked 15 and 16. So Mr. Heat used to see me walking in the neighborhood. So a couple times he would say, hey, come over and work. Whenever you're in school, come over and work. So one day I just went over and worked. And I happened to only be the age of 12. Uh, but, went into work, and it was the most rewarding experience of my life.
Yeah.
Just over the years, Mr. Heat taught me about business. He taught
Mhm.
me about understanding investment. He taught me about awareness of stocks and, just how to run, to turn, an organization from a mom and pops to a company, to a corporation,
Wow.
and really understanding that as a perspective. And the last thing he taught me, and most important thing, when I'm telling my story, one day and I was 15,
Mhm.
I happened to be on a route with him. And we're delivering ice as a part of the route. And he says, I need to run to my house because his kids were home for college. And I went to his house. And this is the first time I've met someone who actually owned a house,
Mhm.
a home, and his home was in the shape of H. And I said to myself, that H represents heat, but it can also represent how. And
Mhm.
so for me, if I'm going to be successful in life, I got to make sure that I'm focusing on transitioning my life to have things such as that. And, when you kind of know the story, I purchased some land and, later on in life, actually built me a home in the shape of H, from that perspective.
That's awesome, man. Good job. How long ago did that happen?
We built the house. I purchased the land in 2007, and actually built our latest home in 2020, so 5 years ago.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Good
Yeah.
job. Good job. And it's in the shape of an H.
It is in the shape of an H.
Love it.
And so the driveway is actually in the shape of a C.
Yeah.
So actually, you enter through the C, which is, representing Cedric,
Right.
and actually the initials of both of my kids, and then you go into the H.
Awesome. I love it. That's so cool. So that's like full circle, right? That is so cool. So when you go to high school,
Yep.
did you have a favorite subject?
I did. So my favorite subject, which I actually dedicate this to Mr. Isaac Lightfoot, who was my DECA teacher.
Mhm.
So I actually took distributing education classes and courses as a part of high school,
Mhm.
which was on the vocation track. I was the first in my family to apply for college,
I
and
got
that
you.
was actually a mistake. I happened to go to walk into the library as a high school junior,
Mhm.
and there was a group of my friends that were meeting.
Mhm.
It was Dunker Club, and they were like, "This is the business club. Hey, just sit down." And I was going to wait for them to hang out with them a little bit later, and I got so intrigued about what they were talking about. And Mr. Lightfoot was an ex-college basketball player,
Mhm.
and he said, "Hey, just come in and sit down."
Yeah.
I knew Mr. Isaac Lightfoot in part because he was my assistant coach in high school basketball.
Mhm.
Didn't necessarily know what he taught,
Mhm.
and went in and sat down, and that was really the beginning of my formal transformation of understanding about stocks and options and so forth as a part of that, and networking. And so my favorite subject was distributing education. He helped me to get into college, and I dedicate, the forward, and he wrote the forward to one of my books to talk about the journey of taking someone from the inner city and now giving back by providing a resource and a guide for people to learn about financial literacy.
That's awesome. I love that. So after high school, where do you go?
Mhm. So after high school, as I mentioned, I played basketball, but I wasn't very good at basketball. I happened to be on a very good basketball team. We were ranked actually nationally,
Ooh,
and at 6'4", I was actually the small forward. We actually had three members of our team to went to play Division 1, and one actually made it and was drafted into the NBA as a number 7 lottery pick.
wow.
Um, so I went to college. I actually went to college on a music scholarship. I
Okay.
went to Florida A&M University to march in their marching band and symphonic band on a music scholarship. I was very gifted and talented with an instrument, and graduated, and then went
What
off
instrument?
to tuba. Uh,
Really?
yeah, oh yes, I can. I was too big to tote the little instruments. My hands are very big, so I
Yeah.
said, "Give me something I can handle." It
Yeah.
was I had the tuba that point in time, and or a French horn, and I was like, the French horn is a little too dainty for me. I need to have something that I can carry.
Something manly, baby. I love that. That is so cool. So
There's a
in
saying that Florida in them that the base of the viper makes the crowd hyper, and the bases are, when the tubas start playing, you get on your feet.
that's it, baby. That's it. Yeah, absolutely. You get moving, right? So
Absolutely, absolutely.
so what did you major in college?
Interesting. I originally went to college as a freshman, first year student to major in pharmacy. So I
Okay.
was going to be a pharmacist.
Okay.
Because
Why?
that was the most professional person that I actually saw. And I figured, a lot of people have to go to pharmacy to get their drugs. So why don't become the neighborhood pharmacist?
Okay.
That was my original goal. But if you know anything about marching band, especially in historical Black colleges, you're performing all of the time. And
Mhm.
you're traveling from one part of the country. I mean, we were actually traveling abroad. And so going to organic chemistry class and marching the band, it wasn't blending together. So eventually I majored in social psychology,
Okay.
and got my undergrad degree in psychology, with the emphasis in social psychology, and then went off to grad school at University of Tennessee.
Okay.
Very fortunate from that perspective.
So why psychology?
Psychology, well, there's only a few courses, majors that you can have that allow you to keep your scholarship.
Okay.
Music was one of those, psychology was one of those,
Okay.
sociology, in part because you were just performing all the time.
I got you. Okay.
And so I had to have a major that allowed me to keep my scholarship because I
Absolutely.
couldn't
Yeah.
afford school without
Yeah, I totally get that. And that's cool. So of those you chose psychology and graduated with a bachelor's in that. And then you decided to go to Tennessee. Why Tennessee?
Yeah, that's a whole other story, and a very
We're all
powerful
about
story.
stories here.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I'm going to date myself a bit.
That's all right. You're allowed.
So April of 1993, we had an unfortunate incident in the United States known as the Rodney King riots.
Yeah.
I happened to be an RA in a residence hall at this point in time.
Wow.
And it was the night that I happened to be on duty. And because we were on the East Coast, we were 3 hours later, so it was nighttime. We had just finished intramurals and just had a great time. And if you know anything about how the universities are situated in Tallahassee, the Florida A&M and Florida State actually sits right next to each other. They're adjacent to each other.
I didn't know that, but okay.
Yeah, they're adjacent to each other, separated by railroad tracks. Interesting. But Florida A&M sits at the top of
There's
the
some
hill.
symbolism for you.
Yes. So, just had a great time. Later that night, of course, some things kind of popped off and set off, and now you have friends that were hanging out with each other, not fighting each other. For me, I did something that, I have a lot of pivots in my life, and I have a lot of inflection points, and this was one of them. I happened to go into the RA's office and see duct tape. And so I ran out and grabbed duct tape and started duct taping people together or their hands together, because I was like, we have worked too hard on the synergy and relationships to be fighting each other. And let's be honest, I thought the next day I was going to get sent home. And actually, back then we didn't have, cell phones, or, we literally had a payphone in the middle of the hallway. And so I got my cord and put my phone, the cords in the phone, and I called my mother and says, I'm probably coming home today. I want to apologize for letting you down, and please tell my grandmother, because I was too saddened or too afraid or scared to call her directly. And my grandparents. Long story short, there was an investigation. Later that day, I get a phone call to come to the president's office. And the president, the vice president, chief of police sent me down and says, hey, we've talked to dozens of people, and we want to thank you for saving our campus, because it could have been a lot worse. And now we don't condone what you have done, but we're going to be very appreciative that you cared enough to look at our community and really save our community from the perspective of your actions. And rather than kick me out, they actually gave me a hand up, and they said, hey, have you considered, once you graduate, a year or so from now, have you considered going into student affairs? And I said, student affairs? No, I don't. I thought student affairs was a department. I said, oh, it is actual profession. And they said, well, you can go to grad school, and this was a key term, and we can work with whatever school you would like to go to. We have a couple of schools that we've gone to that we have connections with to get you a scholarship and to get you housing. I said, sign me up. And so I went to University of Tennessee because they gave me not just a graduate assistantship, they actually gave me an entry-level position. And my benefits included paying for my hours to go to grad school. So that was why I went to University of Tennessee. And I majored in higher education administration. So that was the beginning of my journey as a higher education administrator.
So you thought from your actions that they were going to send you home. What was it about your actions that made you think they were going to send you home?
Because, to grab someone and or to restrain them is, it can be viewed as that you're either assaulting or accosting someone because you're restricting their access.
Or like false imprisonment or something,
Absolutely. It's a number of things.
So what you were doing was you were breaking up the fracas, so to speak, right? You were breaking up the fights.
I was breaking up the fights, especially because there was the synergies between the campuses that we didn't have. And I didn't want to perpetuate that as a part of, this is going to be the legacy between these two institutions, because that issue really didn't have anything to do with us directly.
Right.
but indirectly it would have influences on how we viewed each other. And we had just competed against each other in intramural finals between the two institutions earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way they looked at it, you actually calmed it down. The way you were looking at it was, they're probably going to throw the book at me. I'm probably coming home. So here's the $64,000 question.
Huh?
You call your mom,
Uh-huh.
you tell her that you're probably going to be coming home today and you're really, really
Come
sorry
home.
for disappointing her. And then you call her back and you say, by the way, not only am I not coming home today, they're arranging for me to go to grad school on a scholarship, right?
Well, yeah.
What was that reaction like? You have to describe it to us, because we went from she's expecting you home as a punishment, right? To mom, I'm going to grad school, and right. I mean, I refer to my mother as mama, but it's like, mama, I'm going to, right? I mean, wow, what a difference.
It was even worse than that. So my mother didn't call me back. One of my grandmothers called me back and said, okay, is it something that you would like to share with me? And I
Oh my
said,
goodness gracious. Oh my God. So that was fun.
Yes. Please forgive me for not calling you.
Was this before the meeting?
This was after the meeting.
Oh, after the meeting. Okay.
Yeah. So my grandmother called and says, "Is something that you would like to share with me?"
You're in deep, you know what, right?
And I was like, "Please forgive me for not calling you, because I felt that point in time I was letting you down."
Yeah.
And long story short, let me tell you what happened,
Mm-hmm.
and let me tell you, what have come of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I never forget this, because it was one of the first times that I realized that our purpose in life is usually bigger than us.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Did you feel like you were doing the right thing?" I said, "Yes." She says, "Well, then, long as you feel like you're doing the right thing, don't worry about the end result." And this is, my grandmother was a very spiritual person. She says, "Your gifts will always make room for you, because you were doing the right thing and then following your gifts of bringing people together. Now it has made room for you to know. Now you don't have to worry about it. You can go into your senior year of college, not trying to figure out what you're going to do. You already know what you're going to. You already know where you're going to do, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. Remember, your steps will be ordered."
You do know that you were raised by a world-class family. You do know that, right? And I do hope that you thank God every day for them, because here's the thing. That could have gone so many different directions.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And oh my goodness. I mean, for them to have that reaction, right? So what did your mom say?
So eventually, my mom and stuff called me back, and I talked to my grandparents. And I said situational circumstances, they all had the same type of reaction. And they also had to reassure me, "Hey, you're never letting us down. The fact that we have someone in college is significant enough for us." And everybody was comfortable, everyone understood, and then they just began to say, "Have you done what you needed to do? Have you thanked God? Have you given him the honor and praise the fact that you don't have to worry about now consideration of graduate school?"
Yeah.
And so you're reversing the curse over our life of poverty. And you need to think about how that's going to become the next iteration of how our family evolves. It is so interesting, because 13 months later, in May of 1994, when I graduated, I'm getting a little emotional. When I graduated college, my grandparents were there. My mother was there. My uncles were there. At this point in time, there is 12 grandkids. So my 11 cousins are there. On one side, I'm the only grandchild. On the other side, I'm the oldest of the grandkids. So my 11 cousins are there. And I never forget my grandmother at 5'1", I'm 6'4", she came over to me and said, "Baby, I want your I want your gown." I said, "No, Grandma, this gown belongs to me." And she said, "Baby, if you want to see it tomorrow, you're going to give Grandma your gown." I said, "Yes, ma'am. I know what that means." So I take off my gown, and Mike, when I tell you, this has been a seminal moment for my family. She took off the gown and she told all of my 11 cousins to get in this gown. And she says, "From this standpoint forward, your my expectations for you as my grandkids is that each of you bring me your college graduation gown. That is all Grandma wants for you to repay me and for your payment from that perspective." Now there's 18 of us. 18 of us. We went from me being the first to apply for college. Now there's 18 of us. The youngest one, 18, Braxton, just graduated college last May of 2024. And all of us, even though my grandmother's no longer with us, there's a chest on my grandmother's grave. And last Mother's Day, we put Braxton's gown inside of that chest. And so all 18 grandkids have degrees. Now, what's even more powerful is my mother, who gave birth to me, went back to school in her late 40s. And 11 years later, she became the second Dr. Howard in my family. And so when we're talking about things of full circle, we broke generational curse because we trusted God, we trusted the process, and we realized that even though favor is not fair, we think God favors over our life. And then, if anyone who knows my story know that I have two wonderful kids. My wife gave birth to two, wonderful kids. My daughter, who happens to be, what we consider to be Doogie Howser, graduated medical school at 21, and is now is a urologist, doing extremely well. And her younger brother is the slacker. He happens to be graduated college, participating in Naval ROTC, and serving our country extremely well on a submarine. And so, just in one generation, you can really be blessed and touched if you're obedient to God's will. And so this when we say that, we've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor a seed begging bread. This is evidence of that the faithfulness of those individuals, my grandparents on both sides, their seed is able to live a life that they dreamt of. And generations that are coming, moving forward, will always understand that particular story.
That is so unbelievably riveting. And it's so cool. It really is. And you should be getting emotional about it because, wow, I love your grandmother, man. She's awesome. I mean, what a family you were born into that you had to help raise you. That's just incredible. Absolutely incredible. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about you going to graduate school to earn your PhD. And we're also going to talk about this amazing book, Unshakable Leadership, and the amazing things that you're doing to help people out there. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. We're back with Cedric B. Howard, actually Dr. Cedric B. Howard. So you finish at Tennessee with your master's, and you decide to go to school to earn your PhD. Can you talk about that for a second?
So yeah, when you're in higher education, you realize that, with a master's, that is great for you to get into the field, and to progress throughout the field. So I was very fortunate that shortly after entering my master's program, I got very active within my profession and my professional organizations. And so I knew that within 2 years, I was going to enter into the field of higher education. What I didn't know is that during my third year within a profession, I was going to have the opportunity to become a college vice president. I was age 26. And the president, loved the work that I had done. I was actually had moved from Tennessee to Utah, and got married and had my firstborn, and now moving back to the city of Memphis to take on the vice president role at a small liberal arts college there in Memphis. But my president says, in order for you to progress, throughout your profession, you need a terminal degree. And so I actually went to school there in Memphis and got my very first Doctor of Education degree. And then a little bit later, about 5 years later, so I finished that up in 2009. And about 5 years later, when my mom was finishing up her master's degree, she said, "Hey, son, can you help me, or would you consider going to school with me? As I go to seminary, would you consider going through this experience and supporting me? Because I've, struggled with this whole, thesis writing, and now I got to write a dissertation." And I said, "Hey, I'll support you, and we'll do it together." And I realized if I'm going to support you in your classes, especially seminary, I might as well go ahead and start taking classes myself. And so actually, my mother and I got my second doctorate in Christian counseling, and she got her original doctorate in theology. And
How was that
so I actually
experience?
have 4 degrees from that perspective. And that served as a springboard for kind of my life and trajectory within higher education and the field of education.
How was that experience?
It was challenging. It was challenging. In part because my mother and I have very similar personalities. And we're
I
both type
love that,
A's. And
man.
so
I love that. Sons often do have the same personalities as their mother. I do too. I do too, right? And my daughter
yes,
has the same personality as me. She's like me, but just female, right? I mean, it's a crack up, man.
we have similar stories. I oftentimes say that my wife gave birth to her mother-in-law.
Oh my
So
gosh. That's such a
with
crack
my
up.
daughter,
That's such a crack up. Do you mind if I share something with you?
please.
So 25 years ago, a good friend of
Mhm.
mine called me and she asked if I would come down and talk to her first real estate principles class that she had ever taught. She used to sell new homes and I financed them. That's how she and I became
Okay.
really good friends. She went to school at night, earned her bachelor's degree, earned her master's degree, and earned her PhD. She went to work for this local college and they put her in charge of real estate because she had the most real estate experience of anybody. She had me come down and talk to her class. She walked me out after the class to my truck and she said, "In 25 years, when I retire, you're going to take my spot. There's
Mm.
nobody there's nobody on the planet that cares and is more passionate about doing the right thing with these students than you are." And she
Mhm.
said, "You're the one, you can carry on my legacy," right? That was 25 years ago. I'm not joking. Last month she called me and she said, it's been 25 years. It's time for you to take my spot." So I
Wow.
literally start classes in a couple of weeks to go back to school at the University of Oklahoma to finish my bachelor's degree and to also complete my master's.
What a
And
blessing.
in a couple of years, I'm going to take over the business department at this local college that I'm now, by the way, an instructor for. I'm now an adjunct instructor for real estate for them. So it's crazy, right? It's
Yes.
unreal how life
Yes.
happens. But 25 years ago, when she said that to me in the parking lot, I thought, okay, right? But it literally happened, man. So it's crazy. So you have two doctorate degrees, a master's and a bachelor's, right? We're kind of
Uh-huh.
collecting them, right? But you
Uh-huh.
went to school with your mom, which I think is amazing, absolutely amazing. you get into, so you're working in administration and education.
Yes.
At some point, you decide that you're going to venture into, and you're in what you said before we hit record, your words transition, right, into the private sector. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah. So it was actually was a mistake. And it's like kind of like my my
We're
life
just kind of like
has,
mistaking all over the place, right?
I oftentimes say that your test becomes your testimony. So
Yes.
my mess has become my message
Yeah.
from that perspective. In 2002, when I happened to have my second vice presidency, I was actually in the city of St. Petersburg, who had
Okay.
just had riots
Okay.
several years before. And in my work with the community, I realized that the issue was that there was a lack of understanding of economic drivers.
Yeah.
And as much as we talk about empowering people, we oftentimes don't recognize the economic effects
Mhm.
that social economic class has on class health and just overall development of a class of a group of individuals.
Yeah. Amen.
And so I recall someone said, "Well, Cedric, we've kind of heard about your story. How did you do it?" And I said, one of the things I had to do was develop a financial curriculum for my family
Mhm.
because I had to rewrite our narrative,
Mhm.
and I had to rewrite that mental talk that we have.
Yeah.
And I had to correct our our habits, attitudes, behaviors, and expectations as a family in
Right.
order to reach this goal that my grandmother had set forth for us.
Mhm.
And that led to, well, why don't you write that up as a curriculum for the community? And that curriculum actually became my very first book that I published that's entitled Freedom, a step-by-step guide to financial independence and wealth building.
Wow.
And that was how that began. And so really it was if when you're reading a book, and I tell people all the time, I don't write books to sell them. I
Yeah.
write books to educate and to develop.
Yeah.
And so that actually takes a person from understanding their budget to FICA to credit to investment and even into how did that transition to wealth building, which understanding LLCs and trusts and just all that, as a step-by-step guide.
Right.
And so that was where things began. And as a part of that, my mother left the paper mill, finally retired, and went into ministry.
Wow.
And one of the things she wanted to do was go into old neighborhood and buy up all the old homes. And
So
so I had to learn how to, and she didn't want to flip them she wanted to go and secure them and then turn them into either um, sober homes or homes for abused women. And so that was what she wanted to do. Well, of course, she went to the person that she knows, her only child, and
Mhm.
said, "Hey, I need for you to learn this."
Mhm.
And I also realized that in order for me to do this, I can't do it as a person.
Yeah.
So understanding the structures of, S corps, C corps, LLCs, just all of that, land acquisitions. I mean, just the whole array of things. That's something I had to educate myself on. And so that's kind of how I got into the entrepreneurship and the business aspect, and that has just evolved since then.
How many houses did she buy?
She wound up buying 5 total houses that surround that surrounds the church. And then she has another 7 acres that she has to build a bit of I'm gonna say it's a small summer camp
Mhm.
for kids to have things to do. So like they're there now during the summer, so they have things to do to get them out of the inner city.
Wow. That's
And
so
she's
cool.
developed that property.
That is so cool, man.
Yeah,
That's so
yeah.
cool. Okay.
So that's kind of how I got, into business, and that's where things, also evolved because as my, family were graduating, now I have cousins that are into real estate or
Mhm.
banking or, went to law school. And so what we developed was, a bit of our own family ecosystem to sustain ourselves.
Yeah.
And, rules of engagement around how to do just the basic type things that we would go to others for. And that's kind of how we operate as a family.
Wow. I love that. I love that. Okay. Unshakable Leadership
Yeah.
is your latest book.
Yes.
There are people that are listening. We're now in 66 countries worldwide. There are people listening to this that are thinking about writing a book.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Can you talk about the mindset? Talk about what caused you to do this?
Yeah. So in my profession, in order to move up, you have to what we call publish or perish.
Yeah.
And so for me, besides being an administrator, I'm also have full faculty professor status, ranking within a higher education institution within the institution.
Right.
And so I was publishing articles and writing book chapters within my professional organizations. That is good, but that is a very small slither of people that you're talking to. So I
Gotcha.
decided that it's time for me to start doing that for my community. And I told you about freedom. So one of the things I realized is that we have a leadership crisis. And the reason I think we have a leadership crisis is in part because we're not training leaders any longer.
Right.
We're training in many ways people to be managers, to manage tasks, and not
Functionaries.
to necessarily set vision.
Yeah. To be functionaries. Right.
Absolutely.
Here's your job description. Stay in here and just deliver the orders.
There you go.
Yeah.
And it's
oh
very
my gosh.
transactional and not
Right.
relational.
Right. It
And
needs to be
so
inspirational, right?
it does.
Yeah.
It does. It really does. And so some of my corporate clients said, "Hey, I love working with you. This is transforming me, but I need something to work with my mid-level managers and my entry-level managers." And so I said, "Well, here's a curriculum." They were like, "Okay, the curriculum worked well, but realized that I'm dealing with 4 generations now in the workplace, and I need some flexibility and tools." And so I actually wrote
They need something to put in their hands,
Unshakable.
right?
Need something in their hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I actually wrote Unshakable to help leaders understand how to become leaders. And that first start with what is your leadership philosophy and how are you evolving as a leader?
Yeah.
And so being self-cognizant and reflective is an important piece. I oftentimes say the greatest struggle a person has to overcome is the one within themselves.
Absolutely.
And so if
1000%.
we're not leading from faith, from fear, we're leading from our faith. But if you don't have those experiences, it's very hard to adjust how you have been trained. And so Unshakable becomes that kind of workbook, that tool that you use to transition from management into true leadership.
Yeah. So in Unshakable Leadership,
Uh-huh.
what makes it unshakable?
First of all, I think the thing that makes what makes it unshakable is realizing that you have the gifts within yourself to be exceptional.
Yeah.
And we don't have to lead from a place of deficit.
It's that inner talk, right? Like
There
you
you
talked
go.
about this your entire life. It's
You
that,
have to.
yeah, it's that dialogue that's taking place internally, right?
Yes. The power of thought means that you now have the power to understand how you think
Yeah.
and in what ways do you think.
Yeah.
And the way you think oftentimes shape your perspective and perception of yourself and your organization.
Yeah. I
So the
agree with that
self-talk
1000%.
set the foundation for creating the images that you translate those images into perspective and language.
Right.
And that language really orders how you govern yourself and the organization that you're leading.
So Unshakable Leadership is basically about how you work on yourself and how that work that you do on yourself then translates into your ability to lead others.
Absolutely.
So
If you can't
this is
lead yourself,
brilliant,
how are
by
you
the
going to
way.
lead others?
This is brilliant. Okay. This is exactly the kind of conversation that needs to be had right now. I mean, we talk a lot about leadership here. We talk a lot about parenting here, which I think is sacred leadership, right? And
Absolutely.
one of the things we talk about is we talk about the power of questions.
Mhm.
And the reason for it is there are bosses and there are leaders. Okay. A boss is going to walk in the door because they have a massive amount of insecurity. And they're going to say something like, I want this, this, and this done, and I want it done yesterday. Walk out the door and slam the door. They don't give anybody any opportunity to talk, feedback, dialogue, nothing. Okay. A leader walks in the door and says, we have these three things that we're trying to accomplish as an organization. How, and it's here, we're here. How can you help us get from here to here? In other words, what's the solution, right? It's not the top down, I know all the answers thing. It's you're on the front lines. I'll give you an example. A good friend of ours, good friend of the program, has been on 3 times, wrote a book called Nobody's Coming to Save You. And in the book, he's a Green Beret, former Green Beret. In the book, he talks about a big company that hired him. He was off to the side of the stage. The CEO gets up and says, I'm going to introduce you in a minute to our keynote speaker. But I have a slide deck here that tells you, that'll catch you up to speed on how we're doing as a company. He goes in and starts doing the slide deck. Within 8 seconds, everybody in the room that works, all these people work for him, they were all on their phones.
Yes.
Okay. But if he had stood up and said, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker here in a minute. I just have a question for you. You're on the front lines. You're the people that are making this company succeed. What do you think this slide deck's going to say is that's as to how we're doing as a company?
Sure.
That's all you have to do. You just have to engage them, right? You have to care enough to ask, and you have to engage them. It takes effort. But that's real, to me, that's real leadership.
Yes. It takes for you to be vulnerable to the fact that you don't have to have all the answers.
Yes.
And collectively, we're stronger and more knowledgeable than I am as an individual person.
1000%. I'm not the one on the front lines taking the incoming calls. I'm not the one that's making the sales. You with me? I'm layers removed from that, right?
Yes.
And what I need to know is what they know, because that's where the answer is.
Yes.
You with me?
And,
That's
and,
what a leader does.
and I think an important thing is, as you mentioned the term bosses versus leaders, I oftentimes say that is the trap of being a manager.
Yeah.
Managers maintain. They're very task oriented and they're very dictatorial, top down. Do this.
Yeah.
Count the number of widgets.
Yeah.
A leader says, hey, let's create a shared vision.
Yeah.
I may not have all the answers, but collectively, I validate and I affirm the fact that we're going to build this together.
Yeah.
And so now you have a vested interest in the success of the task and or the direction, because you've had a role to play in shaping that vision moving forward.
Yeah. That's just awesome. I love this. So if somebody wants to buy your book, Unshakable Leadership, where can they get it?
Yes, you can go to Amazon and put in Cedric B. Howard. You can go to books by BOOKS.BY, Cedric B. Howard, to purchase. And if you can't find either way, just simply go to my website, cedricbhoward.com. Everything is Cedric B. Howard.
Okay.
And there's a link to get my books and or other information to contact me on my website. And I welcome, people inquiring and, reaching out for questions or, just to have perspective.
Well, you're coaching and consulting now too. So you're kind of doing all of that in addition to being an author. So if somebody needs leadership help, and it sounds like you can help them a lot, because we have a real lack of leadership in this country right now. How can they reach you to potentially hire you to help them?
Yes, you can go to cedricbhoward.com.
Okay.
There's an inquiry form that is there, as well as my email address and contact information.
Okay.
And that comes directly to me, and I get the information. I'll respond to that form directly. That doesn't go to an assistant or anyone else. I'll respond directly.
So it's CEDRICB Howard HOWARD.com.
.com. Yes.
Cedric B. Howard, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been a great time. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.